Okay. I think Barbara Edmonds has...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To your point, yes, the Māori economy is one of the fastest growing sectors in our country. And to your point around unlocking Māori land, in this year's budget, you set aside $5 million in Vote to Māori development to help unlock that land or do the policy work around that. Yet you chose $23 million for ministerial services travel. Why that choice? $5 million to help unlock Māori land for the fastest growing sector versus $23 million for ministerial travel.
See, this is the difference between you and me. You think you measure your impact by how much you spend. I think we should measure our impact by what we achieve. And I do not share the view that putting double the amount of money into policy advice on that matter would create double the amount of impact.
Okay, thank you. Now, we've got a number of members still on the list. Some haven't asked primary questions. So what we're going to do is ask members to shorten up on the subs, and we're not going to have any cross subs because I want to get back to over the side of the table before 11:30, okay? In the meantime, we're going to go to Miles Anderson.
Morning, Minister. Really enjoying your fulsome answers.
He's due for promotion, Mr. Chair.
Was consideration given to adding the company tax instead of putting forward the investment boost policy?
Yes, it was, because we are conscious that at a headline level, New Zealand's rate of corporate tax is now looking pretty high compared to a lot of the countries that we compete for investment with. However, when we compared the impact that a reduction in the headline rate of the corporate tax would have with the impact dollar for dollar we could get through the investment boost policy, the investment boost policy stacked up a lot better in terms of the impact it would have on investment rates, wages and employment creation. And essentially, that's because, of course, a reduction in the headline corporate rate rewards past profits, whereas the investment boost policy specifically targets future investment. So it directly drives the behaviour and activity we want to see.
Supplementary, Ryan Hill.
Mr. I understood you were at Field Days recently, and just before Investment Boost was launched. What was the feedback, from the industry that you?
Well, look, fantastic feedback. Thank goodness for the farmers. They are genuinely driving New Zealand's export-led economic recovery, and after many years of hard work are getting very good prices offshore and look to be doing so into the future while also creating good volumes. They've got cash in their pockets, and the investment boost policy is exactly the elbow in the ribcage they need to get spending. And I have had enormous amounts of feedback, both via our MPs and directly from the community, that we've seen an uptick in the purchases of agricultural machinery, and willingness to upgrade technology on farm, of assets on farm. And that's good news, not only because, of course, it gets cash flowing in the real economy in terms of the businesses from which those purchases are being made, but also because it means that our farmers will continue to be more efficient, productive and profitable into the future. New Zealand's secret sauce in ag is that we have the most productive, most efficient, non-subsidised farmers in the world. And that is a consequence of their choices over successive generations to make investments that allow them to be savvy, very astute farmers, and the investment boost policy will support them to continue to be so.
Okay, we're going to go to close over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why, when you made changes to KiwiSaver to halve government contributions and to increase the employer and employee contribution rates, did you not set aside funding for the increased cost of the Crown as an employer, as John Key and Bill English did when they made similar changes in 2011?
Well, look, the member has made that claim about what Bill English and John Key did, and it is at odds with the advice that I have had from Treasury. So I am going to if you can just let me pause for a moment while I get to that advice, because it is something that I have been wanting to correct the member on for some time. So I want to be precise in the way in which I do that. Sorry, I've gone to the wrong document.
Is that information publicly available, or are you able to release it?
I'm going to make that information publicly available right now.
Great.
Any moment.
So the approach that we have taken, which is that no additional funding is being provided through Budget 25 to agencies to meet the cost of increasing employer contributions for government employees, because agencies in the first instance will be asked to assess what those costs are and then to look at options for meeting those costs within existing baselines. And then we will consider whether any future funding is required to be topped up at the next budget. The advice I have received from Treasury, which I read to you now, this approach is consistent with that taken when KiwiSaver contributions were increased from 2013 through Budget 2011. Agencies were expected to cover KiwiSaver costs from existing baselines.
There was, however, a specific fund that was also set up to address that initial cost, and then it was expected to meet from agency baselines in that 2011.
Well, I am repeating to you the Treasury advice I have received, which is that agencies were expected to cover KiwiSaver costs from existing baselines.
Okay, and I'd love to have the facts printed and happy to engage with the media on that later. I guess to that effect, you have seen those costs or the potential costs reflected in the specific fiscal risks in BFU. And also, if I'm to hear clearly what you're saying and to read between the lines of your answers, both on Radio New Zealand and in what you've just provided to us, effectively, the increased costs of the Crown are to be met by one of three ways. So please correct me if I'm wrong. One is in potential future cuts, because they are to be met by agency baselines. The other is an increased cost potentially in the budget next year, or thirdly, in potential wage suppression for public sector employees. Do you accept that? And if not, why?
I accept that the government has choices about how it meets any additional costs that arise because of increasing KiwiSaver contributions to the KiwiSaver funds of New Zealand and government employees.
So to that effect, you do accept that it could come at the cost of future wage suppression, at future costs represented in the budget next year, or at other hidden costs or cuts rather to other the agencies and ministries?
The government has made a deliberate policy choice, which is that we want to see New Zealanders given a ready means by which to increase their KiwiSaver balances in retirement. We think it would be wrong to exclude public sector employees from that policy. The government as an employer will have to make the same decisions and trade-offs that employers across the country will be making as they work out how they're going to meet those increased contributions to New Zealanders' KiwiSaver funds. The consequence will be this. Overall, the vast majority of New Zealanders who choose to take part in KiwiSaver at the default rate will have far bigger KiwiSaver balances at retirement, 25% bigger, 28% bigger. Many KiwiSavers will also be able to make withdrawals when they go to buy their first home, and the overall pool of KiwiSaver savings able to be invested in the New Zealand economy will also grow over time. I think these are positive things, and I would welcome the members' support.
Okay, last up.
Respectfully, did you ask Treasury or officials to do any estimations or ballparking whatsoever as to what the potential increased cost could be to the Crown as an employer under the increase?
Yes, they have done some ballparking, and I want to be careful before I confirm that number because I'm not sure how sensitive it is in terms of wage negotiations and collective bargaining. So I would check that before I provide it ad hoc in this committee. But what I can say, it is vastly, vastly smaller than the number you've been bandying about.
Again, those are just based on our estimations because
They're wrong.
the publicly available.
Right, well, this
They're
is the
wrong.
last
As is your
debate
estimation that
for
you can add
the
billions
session,
to debt and
Ms.
taxes
Rose.
without trashing an economy. That's also wrong.
I'm more than happy to debate.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
Last question for the session. Thank you.
Respectfully, Mr. Chair. I mean,
Okay,
come
I'm trying to
on,
shorten it up. We've got a
basically-
long list of people.
Okay, so I guess just on the ramifications for the broader economy and working people, however, on page 29 of BFU, Treasury outlined explicitly, and here I'm quoting, that the economic impact of changes to KiwiSaver, quote, we have assumed that employers will offset the majority, that is 80% of their higher contributions via lower than otherwise wage increases. These lower wage increases have a negative impact on household spending. That is, as a result of the KiwiSaver changes that you have made, there will be less household spending stimulating the economy.
Well, look, that was a feature of the analysis that Michael Cullen gave when he first introduced the policy. He acknowledged transparently and openly that these were trade-offs that would occur within employment negotiations, and that is the case. However, it would be wrong to consider the impacts of the KiwiSaver policy in isolation, because offsetting that policy, we also had in our budget investment boost and a number of other growth-enhancing initiatives, which on the margin will have positive impacts on both wage growth, household consumption, and GDP growth. And so it is appropriate, I think, to look at it as a whole rather than to isolate one particular policy.
Sorry,
Okay,
just
we're
to
gonna
be
go
crystal
to
clear on
Dan
that.
Bidwell,
Just to be crystal clear on that. Actually,
Well-
my understanding of the analysis from officials is that investment boost can contribute towards GDP growth. But can you point us specifically to where that says that we will have wage growth as a result as
Yes,
well?
that is specific, and it's in the documents we released on budget day. The effect on wage growth is expected to be 1.5% over a 20-year period, with at least half of that front-loaded into the first 5 years. In fact, in the regulatory impact statement, which is available to the member, the IRD make clear that they expect the beneficiaries of the investment boost policy to be New Zealand workers, both through increased employment opportunities and wage increases, that the benefits of the policy will be very broadly spread throughout the economy. The impact on wage growth, it is very easy to
Where does it
understand,
say
which
that
is
in
when
the
a business is more
report?
productive due to higher rates of capital intensity, it is better able to pay its workers more. That is a significant factor in those economies who do pay their workers more. They are more capital intensive, they are more productive, they have higher paid workers. That's exactly what we want to achieve and was a huge driver behind our introduction of the investment boost policy.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to the member for North Coast.
Where does it say that in the report? I'm looking through the same report that by the way, Chloe's got open, which is the Budget, Economic and Fiscal Update for 2025. That claim there that the investment boost is going to, do a magical trickle-down thing. I'm trying to figure out where that is in the report.
It's probably doing the magical trickle down as in not trickling.
Yeah, it's not trickling. It's not very much trickling happening either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that KiwiSaver quote that Chloe that made, yeah, that's in the report that I'm reading now. Under the economic impact of changes to KiwiSaver, we have assumed. Why assume? Okay, that employers will offset the majority, 80% of their highest contributions via lower than otherwise wage increases. These lower wage increases have a negative impact on household spending. Higher contributions from employees also have a negative impact on household spending. We have assumed, again, I don't know why they're assuming, that this effect will be relatively small, reflecting an assumption that around 80% of the increase in employee contributions will come from a redirection of other forms of savings. The reduced... So it doesn't. I correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't sound like the employers are going to do much of an offset, are they?
Yeah, it doesn't, no.
Yeah. So there's an assumption here that the employer is going to offset the deduction that the government is doing. How? How? Is there a policy or something?
The last time they cut it out.
I mean, I'm not seeing a proposed policy or anything that's going to get employers to make up the shortfall.
Yeah.
I mean, if people that vote National are more than welcome to correct me and go, no, Laura, you're wrong. And
Will
you're
they
very
find
dumb.
their forge?
Yeah, it's like, no, Laura, you're wrong and you're very dumb. Here's the policy that states that we're going to do exactly that. but no one has come up yet to tell me that. So
Yeah.